The predictions about the catastrophe
as another therapy for Ebola is already being tested on Americans with COVID-19, but it's still unclear when any of these treatments will be widely available.
The State Department raised the travel advisory to the highest level, to level 4.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, the government's top expert on infectious diseases.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dave Holton with Marketing Ideas for Printers, and I welcome you to another episode in our webinar series, Coronavirus Resources for Printers. And I welcome you to my bedroom, as so many of us are doing, working from home. And I always feel I kind of need to add a little explanation to that, because someday in the future, we're wondering, why is the commute from bed to work so short here? The kids are working downstairs. They got the prime spots as we're all working through our coronavirus pandemic. And that leaves me here in the bedroom at my home office. So thank you for joining us again today. Just a reminder, we're going to get underway, start here very quickly, but just a reminder that our purpose on these webinars, why we do what we do, is to provide the resources to help you, to help printers survive now and thrive later. Coronavirus has forced this big, huge reset on our businesses. And the good news is that we can take what we learn now and we can use that to keep you strong after we're done with all of this social distancing. The ideas that we share on these webinars, they're going to be appropriate for all printers. So even if you're not a Marketing Ideas for Printers subscriber, you're still going to be able to adapt these ideas for your own use. Some ideas, they are going to be fine-tuned for our MI4P subscribers. We're going to start diving in, or we have actually already started to dive deeper into those topics on our Thursday webinars. So same thing there too, even though the Thursday webinars are going to be focused a little bit more on our subscribers, they're still appropriate for everyone, because you still might be able to find those ideas and adapt them for your own use too. So I would still encourage you to show up for the Thursday webinars as well. A little bit of housekeeping and we'll be underway shortly. First housekeeping is today's webinar is going to be posted on coronavirusresourcesforprinters.com. And let me just bring that up here. There we go. So coronavirusresourcesforprinters.com. After we're done, we'll get the recording up there. That'll roll into the top spot, and all of the other recordings are still available as well. So we have 10 of them now. This is number 11. And so I'd encourage you, if you've missed any of those episodes, there's where you can find them. There's going to be a survey afterwards, and one of the questions on the survey is going to ask you for ideas that you have that can be shared with others, and also ideas that you have on how we can best help you with resources like this. Please stick around after the webinar wraps up to give us that 30 seconds of feedback. And I would encourage you to ask questions during the webinar too. Go ahead and use the questions panel in the webinar controls. And if we're not able to respond live during the webinar, please know that we'll review all the feedback we received after the webinar is complete. Remember that this is only temporary, and we're going to use the topics like the one we're covering today, and we're going to come out of this even stronger. We will get through this together. Just a little bit more, a few updates that I want to share with you. A couple updates. First of all, probably the biggest update is in one of the recent webinars, we'd mentioned that this webinar is going to be about EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. And we made a last minute change for a handful of reasons, because EOS is very timeless. That's important at any time. Super important now, but important at any time. However, today's topic, a little bit more timely for where we're at right now. We're going to be talking about this, about doing webinars. So the housekeeping item is EOS is coming. That's going to be coming in later in May 19th. But today's topic, we're going to talk to you about engaging your customers through successful online meetings. And to help us do that, I'm sorry, one more little piece of cleanup here. I got to give another teaser as well. The teaser is right down here. This is going to be talked about in more detail on Thursday. We have a new resource where COVID-19 banners for your print buyers. This has been added to all of the websites that we provide to our Marketing Ideas for Printers subscribers. It's also a resource if you're not a subscriber on our website platform. You can still grab these files if you just would like one extra thing to give you a way to talk with your subscriber, with your print buying customers. This banner might be something that you can find helpful. I got to brag on my kids a little bit here too, and here's a picture of them. We are getting these banners ready to add to our customers' websites, and we might like to think we're all techno geeky and automated, but sometimes when you got to move fast, you just got to get that human touch. So here's a picture of my two of my kids, Tessa and Andrew, as they are using the tools to copy these forms onto all of our subscribers' websites. So if you want to see the end result of that, come back on Thursday, and especially for our website subscribers, you're going to see how these are now available for you. You'll see them in your websites right now. You can turn them on. Let me go back to the website, and actually just the teaser on that. Here's an example of those forms, two different kinds of forms. The other one, which we'll again get into detail on Thursday, is Design Edit. One of our add-ons also has 9 COVID-related banners that are ready to go that your print buying customers can use on your website. That's a whole different topic. We'll save that for Thursday, but I wanted to get that teaser out there for you. And now we are going to transition to bring Ryan Maccabee on to the webinar as well. And Ryan, I so appreciate you joining us here today, and just really excited to have you as part of this webinar.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Absolutely, yeah. And Ryan and I just had honestly just a delightful conversation as we were getting ready for this webinar, and I hope that even just a little fraction of the things that we talked about comes through. So for everyone that's here, you're going to enjoy Ryan's tips. Just as a matter of introduction, Ryan is the director for Keypoint Intelligence, InfoTrends production workflow consulting service, which focuses on providing technology, business, and marketing insights to clients in the digital marketing and media and production workflow markets. In this role, he's responsible for conducting market research, market analysis, and forecasting, content development, industry training, and consulting with print service providers. There you go. There's the warm-up.
That's a really long introduction. We have to shorten it up, I think. But no, thanks for the intro there, Dave. So yeah, I mean, basically, I work with print service providers. I work with the vendors in the printing community. Basically, any kind of aspect that we can think of in the larger printing industry, I've probably touched and been involved with that at some point. So that's kind of background, and that's what kind of led me to write this article. You may have seen it on What They Think. Dave has it up on the screen. It's really very timely, and you may ask, well, what does he know about giving webinars? What does he do? And this is actually my 4th webinar, Dave, today, if you want to count, just today alone. So I sat through 3 earlier. So I not only attend a ton of industry webinars, but I also have the responsibility of actually creating content and giving our own webinars in terms of public facing and also private for clients here at Keypoint Intelligence. So that's kind of what led me initially to kind of write this article that you kind of latched onto here.
Yeah, and it's so timely, absolutely so timely. And I think what you'll find as our listeners are here, I think you'll find that Ryan and I are actually probably going to be interviewing each other as we go through here. But let's start with a poll, and I'd like to get you, our listeners, involved. I'm going to just put this poll up on the screen very quickly, and here it is. Are you using online tools like Zoom, GoToMeeting, or similar to reach and engage your customers? So go ahead and give us the yes or no. I see a few of those polls, or a few of the answers coming in, and early indications are that we got a pretty even split here. So we'll let that roll for a little bit longer, and as we're letting that come in, we'll show the results in a moment. But Ryan, one of the things that that you had mentioned is it really caught my attention in your piece is the problem is that it is often painfully obvious that printing companies and vendors are not experienced with delivering quality online conferences and webinars. So we'll address that statement in a bit, but we've got the poll has run here. We got most, well, maybe not most, but a number of people voted, and we got a nice even number. So I'm going to close that poll and we'll share the results here. Here's what you said. 25% of you are using those tools, 75% are not. It might be time to consider using those tools. This is the environment we're in. So Ryan, I'm going to send that back to you. What do you see going wrong when that kind of inspired you to write this piece?
Yeah, I'm not really surprised with the poll results here, where the majority of us are not using these tools and not used to doing that, because as an industry, if we rewind the clock a little bit, we were very much focused on kind of in-person interaction from a sales perspective, working with clients and so forth. Over the past few decades, some of that kind of interaction has transitioned to online e-commerce type transactions, which obviously Marketing Ideas for Printers is heavily involved with and facilitating. But yeah, it's not a kind of core competency or set that we're used to doing. And what we don't really realize as part of that is that you have to kind of really start with what's the why. Why are you wanting to do it? Well, obviously in times that we find ourselves in now, it's really one of the few mechanisms or medium platforms, whatever you want to call it, to actually get in front of customers, to get in front of hopefully prospects that you can start doing business with. And so we really have to think about, why are we doing it? Is it just to basically promote and raise a flag and say, look, this is all the good services that we have been doing. This is what our company is about. But I would challenge you a little bit further than that. In the article, I wrote basically that context is queen and content is king, is kind of how I phrased it. And really, what better way to think about it than the context that we're all living through right now? Because if we all pretty much are operating in a kind of a B2B, maybe B2B2C kind of sense, where we're working with other businesses in many cases. And across the board, I mean, Dave, as a business owner yourself, I mean, what are the core things that you're thinking through right now in terms of challenges that you're trying to solve, and kind of what keeps you up at night, so to speak? And I'll bounce back with the three that I think are probably top of mind for everybody too.
Sure, yeah, and thanks for asking that, because that was a little teaser of what we'd had coming into this conversation, and it really goes back to that why. And so, what was keeping me up at night as we are all approaching this, I mean, all of us as we came to grips, like, hey, yeah, this coronavirus, it's more than just a cute word. It's something we're going to have to deal with, and thinking, what do we do here? And that became our why with this webinar series. And it took a little bit of sleeping on it, but once we looked at our core values and filtered everything through that, it became obvious that our why was to provide hope and help for printers during this time. And that is what's led to this webinar. And part of why I resonated when you wrote that article is because you did such a beautiful job saying why that why is so important. So that's my answer.
Yeah, and you did a great job of really trying to put yourself in your customers' shoes, right? And what do they need? What do they want to hear? What can you help them with? And I think that's what everybody has to do. But there's some universals, I think, that are playing out no matter what the business is. And as owners and businesses in general, with this shift that we're now going through and having to go through because of all the stay-at-home orders and the ripple effects of everything else, it's really, how am I going to cut costs? How am I going to shift the business to some kind of new applications, online interactions, more e-commerce, whatever that ramification or that shift kind of results in? And then ultimately, it's how do I retain my valuable staff that I'm going to need coming out of this, even more so to produce that work or whatever I've shifted to. So, before we got on the live session here, we were kind of talking about, well, what have we seen printers doing so far? And I kind of mentioned that, some of them have started manufacturing kind of protective equipment for the medical community. And one of the ideas that I thought of today as I was sitting through these webinars is, and knew that I had to come on today, is that I could really use a kind of poster that, instead of a virtual background, because you really need a green screen to do that properly on these platforms, I could use a nice personalized poster in the background that instead of seeing my dirty office that's behind me here. So that's something I think that I haven't seen a printer actually offer up yet, but could be something market for it right now.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, yeah, just a tag team on that kind of pre-conversation. One of that parts of that is, and this is for you as printers as well, because this is a tool that you can use to keep on connecting with your print buyers. But I already kind of had some fun with the bed in the background. And I think in today's world, the authenticity that provides, saying that, no, this is real, this is the life we've been forced into right now. You know, that's one part of it. You get the authenticity of my short 5-second commute from getting up in the morning into the office here. And but there is that flip side, as you just said, Ryan. That's an opportunity for printers to get those banners, those official banners, those company logo banners behind your customers, because this is our world. This is Zoom and GoToMeeting. This is what it's going to be for a while longer yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of creating an online session to kind of reach out to customers, I mean, there's different kind of ways you could do that in terms of the content side. You could just simply say, reach out like what Dave has been doing and say, hey, we're here. This is what we're trying to bring together, all this information for you to kind of make sense of this time. You could also basically educate them on your capabilities, but more importantly, there's no right or wrong way in terms of the content. And I would say challenge you to kind of be creative, because the one thing that I do see more times than not is just a PowerPoint deck or some kind of slide deck that's really reiterating what people can probably find on your website, which is, what products you're offering, what kind of markets you serve, and that sort of thing. It's much more impactful if you actually first and foremost do like what Dave and I are doing, and when we're just kind of craving that human interaction because we're all stuck at home, or a lot of us are, to just turn the webcam on. To have more of this interview style, ditch the PowerPoint away. Think about different ways to do it. Use the platforms that you actually have and the tool sets, whether it be conducting polls like what Dave did, whether that be also, I think one very powerful thing you can think about is think about a use case of a customer that you have and something that went really well in terms of a campaign that you printed for them, or a direct mail piece, or whatever the case may be. Have them on and let them tell the story of how you helped them out, particularly if it's been during this time that we've been living through recently. I think it would be a very impactful way, and a different way than just using PowerPoint and so forth.
Yeah, and just from the experience that we're going through right now in this webinar, you've got it right there in the middle of the web page. 2 heads are better than 1. And just to even have this conversation, boy, it's just, and this is for you, should you decide to put a webinar in front of your print buying customers, that is exactly right. It's so much easier to have that conversational feeling. Having said that, and Ryan, I suspect you're going to agree, but keep the conversation going. You don't, but 2 heads are better than 1. And I think you already kind of said it, but even if you don't have 2 heads, 1 is still better than 0.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely don't, if you don't have somebody to partner with. To be honest with you, though, that's really not an excuse. You can always find someone else in your company, right, that they're at home as well. Have them come onto the session and do the kind of back and forth like that as well. It's just the point there is that it's really hard, unless you're like an all-star comedian, to keep, especially if the session runs longer. I mean, this is a nice quick 20-minute type session that we're doing today, but so many times people think, and that's another kind of thing that you need to experiment with. There's no rule on earth that says you have to have a webinar that's an hour long. But that just seems to be the default. Let's break that kind of thinking as well. It doesn't have to be a long, elaborate thing. But if you do choose to do an hour-long thing, it is very difficult for even the most entertaining person to carry that for an hour for the audience's perspective. So yes, 2 heads are definitely better than 1 if you're doing that kind of thing.
And that's a really great point too. And I'll just use again this webinar as an example. For us doing this webinar, we have found that this 20-minute segment, and I'm watching the clock evaporate very quickly on that 20-minute segment. And in all reality, it often goes to closer to 25. But the point is that experiment is very true, and we landed on that 20-minute segment right away, and that has really worked well for this particular webinar. Your mileage may vary, but for us, that has really landed well. We've seen that in the feedback too. That's, thank you for keeping it into a small digestible chunk for us. So yeah, super important point. There is nothing magical about that 60 minutes time frame.
Yeah, let me mention that time aspect a little bit. There's a reason why the TED Talks, and if you don't know what those are, just Google TED Talks and you'll find them. There's a reason. I think their length is 14 minutes, actually, if I remember correctly. There's a reason that the most podcasts only average the length of the average commute, which is around 15 to 25 minutes. It's because our attention span is kind of tuned to that these days. So I would also encourage you to think about the post production of you hosting some kind of online presentation. Don't just let it end with the online presentation. Think about how you're going to serve that up from days after the fact. Like Dave is putting it on a centralized website that's very easy to find. But I would also encourage you to think about it from the consumer's perspective, your audience, your customer. What does their day look like? Do most people have an hour to spend watching a webinar, especially if they want to watch 4 that came out in the past week? Probably not. One of the things that I love it's kind of a time hack is if it's a YouTube type thing or a podcast, I will crank up that speed to like 2x so I can get through it in half the time, but I can still understand it, right? And it sometimes helps when you have someone like myself who has a very slower speaking pattern because they grew up in the southeast of the US. so that always helps too.
Yeah. Well,
think about how it's going to be consumed.
I see one question. It's not so much a question as it's a comment. And Cindy says, thank you. I respect the 20 minutes that you give. It's great. So thank you, Cindy, for that validation. And with that, I think that's also a really good nudge to say, let's keep honoring that 20 minutes. So we are at the end. But I do want to really make this crystal clear. We just really scratched the surface. If you've not seen Ryan's article, please do yourself a favor. It's on the screen now, but we're going to include the link to it in the follow-up in the show notes on coronavirusresourcesforprinters.com. Take a look at Ryan's article and take a look and just be thinking about how you can use something like this, a webinar, to put yourself in front of your print buyers, because let's face it, that's where they're at right now. They're not outside going to other businesses. They're stuck in front of the computer, just like you are right now. So please take a few minutes to get to Ryan's blog here. It's really a super good blog. We just barely scratched the surface of it. Go deeper with that and take a look at Ryan's work there. Ryan, I thank you so much for joining us today. This is a treat. I know we've kind of crossed paths in the past a few times. This is the meaningful one right now for everything we've done to this point. So I thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dave. And I just throw out to the audience, if you have any questions for me, you want to interact with me, probably the best way to find me without a really long email address is just do @mbost. And that's on Twitter, LinkedIn, most of the social channels. You can find me using that moniker. Love to carry on the conversation. If you're doing something unique in the market that you've shifted to because of COVID, I'd love to hear about that too. So appreciate you having me on, Dave.
Yeah, and if you want to send that information afterwards, or we can grab it too, if you want to send that to me, we'll make sure to include that contact information in the show notes as well.
Excellent. Thanks so much.
All right, so let's wrap it up. Just a reminder that the recording of today's webinar is going to be posted on coronavirusresourcesforprinters.com. Ryan will roll into this top spot where we're at now. And help me out too. If you find value in this webinar series and the resources that we're sharing, please do us a favor. Share this website address, coronavirusresourcesforprinters.com, with your fellow printers. There's going to be that survey afterwards, and it's just in just a couple of minutes, and it's just a simple survey where we ask how we can help you. That's where so much of the topics and the ongoing discussion has come from for the ongoing webinars here. So even if it's just a few seconds, just please stop by long enough to give us that survey feedback. Lots of your follow-up is being turned into tips and FAQs that we will continue to deliver via email, blog, or future topics like this. So let me prepare to take us on out of here, and we'll get that survey coming your way in just a moment. I do want to remind you that this is an interesting time we're living in, and we are going to get through this. We will get through this together.